Now, I don't know where you're studying these successful people, but my observation, my study tells me a very different result. Most people, they do not succeed in their late 20s. If you say research by meaning like you see people on Instagram or on Facebook and they succeed in the late 20s, that's not research. That's you're guessing. And that's what they want you to see. The people that I study, the truly successful people, most of them succeed by the late 40s, in some cases late 50s, not late 20s. The successful entrepreneurs that I know that I've had the privilege of sitting down and interviewing through my Dan Lok show, maybe you already know that on my podcast, that I interview heavy hitters, billionaires and multi-millionaires, and I sit down with them, I interview them, and I pick their brains, right? I bring you the best insights. Most entrepreneurs, they don't succeed. They don't succeed in years. They succeed in decades. And people see that as, oh, it is an overnight success. It's not an overnight success, right? Like people see what I do. Oh, I'm an overnight success. Give me a break, right? It's like a 10-year overnight success. The sacrifice you have to make, the price that you have to pay, no one talks about it. You only see the fruit of the labor. You see the glam, you see the glitz, you see the glory. You don't see the blood, sweat, and tears, the nights that you couldn't sleep, the vendors that are calling you, the payroll that you couldn't make, the debt that you got into, the sale you couldn't close, the failures that you have, the bad business partnership, the lawsuits that you have, all this BS, right? That's the price, but most people don't see a lot of that. So that is not true. And that's the problem with a lot of young people. And I get this on YouTube, I have a lot of fans, right? You are 16, you are 18, you are 14, you are 20 years old, and you want to succeed in 2 years. You want to succeed in 5 years. And maybe you could do it. I'm not saying you couldn't. Maybe you could. Most couldn't. I couldn't, right? I'm not smart enough to do that. I don't know about you. Right? Most people, you need to dedicate and you need to give yourself some time. So on one hand, you have a sense of urgency, which is what I teach. You got to have that sense of urgency. At the same time, you need to have patience. It's this yin and yang, right? That you're working your ass off. Yes, you are paying the price, right? At the same time, you know this shit takes time. Anything great takes time. No one becomes a champion overnight. Even though by some like luck that you kind of quote unquote made it a little bit, to sustain, to have the long-term success, that takes work. That takes time. So give yourself a little bit of time. Don't be too hard on yourself. I haven't made it in 2 years. You're not supposed to make it in 2 years. I haven't made it in 5 years. You're just not supposed to make it in 5 years. Ross Perot, you may not know from Perot system. Arguably one of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time. He wrote his book. One of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time. In his book, he did not make money the first 15 years as an entrepreneur. 15 years! Can you imagine? Are you willing to put in the work? Are you willing to work and sacrifice for 15 years? That's true entrepreneur. So I don't fully agree with your study, your research about most people succeed in the late 20s. If you are very, very, very good and you start early, maybe late 30s like myself. If not, late 40s, maybe even late 50s. That's the truth, right? If you're not a subscriber of my podcast, what's wrong with you, man, right? Click a link here, subscribe to my podcast, The Dan Lok Show. Every single week I sit down with a founder, a CEO, a highly successful person, or maybe even a celebrity, and I bring you their best ideas and their best practices. So make sure you check that out.